Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Pete Denby, co-founder of Hyperfinity. This is To Affinity and Beyond, our podcast about decision intelligence, data science and AI, with a particular focus on all things retail and consumer products. We all know it's a very turbulent time for retailers, filled with challenges, risks and opportunities. Over 2 episodes, we'll explore 6 of the biggest trends we're seeing in retail. We'll talk about what they mean for retailers, and as we're a data science and AI company, we'll provide some insight on how data can be used to address each trend. I'm joined today by my Hyperfinity co-founder and our Chief Customer Officer, Thomas Hill. So hi, Tom, where do we find you today?
Hi, Pete. Well, you find me in Leeds, and you find me very frustrated after a long and expensive drive in the absolute rain. I think I might have sailed in half the way rather than driven. I did that because obviously we've got train strikes going on regularly, and I can't trust the rail network at the minute, especially across the north, west to north, east, which is horrific, and the government needs to sort that one out. I'm slowly off the back of 2 10-hour waits in A&E recently for parents and children, and the nurse strikes as well. And by the way, as I talk about strikes, I want you to know I'm in full support of the right to strike, and I'm supportive of the nurses and the railway workers for the shoddy way in which they've been treated to do their jobs, which is a critical service for the UK. So we're going straight in with the controversy. Anyone want to comment on that, feel free. I'll have a good chat about it. And also, yeah, I think it's all fun at the minute, isn't it, with inflation going through the roof. As I've already talked about, my petrol cost a fair bit today. My food's costing an absolute fortune every time I go to the supermarket, and that's some of the things that we'll be talking about later. Hopefully data can solve all of this, Pete, but right now, we'll just go with where we are.
Welcome to the Grumpy Old Men podcast. Politics included. Okay, things can only get better, Tom, so why don't we get into some data and retail chat? Okay, cool. So as promised, we're going to talk about some of the major trends impacting retailers in 2023. And we're going to cover 3 biggies today. So we're going to talk about the cost of living crisis. We're going to talk about the collapse and consolidation of retailers. And we're going to talk about retail media, a new path to retail profit. So let's start with the cost of living crisis, which has been widely documented and felt acutely by everyone, particularly Tom, as you saw via the intro. We seem to have been caught in a perfect storm over the past couple of years: COVID-19 pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and the fallout from Brexit, among the many things that are contributing to the current situation that we face. The Guardian ran an article at the end of last year, which was based on Barclaycard spend data, and in it they noted that the UK's annual inflation rate already stood at just over 5% at the start of 2022, but was pushed higher by the impact on gas and electricity bills of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February. By November, it had more than doubled to almost 11%. Retailers have failed to benefit from the post-lockdown boost in the UK high street activity this year, after soaring energy bills and a cost of living crisis forced households to rein in their spending. Despite an increase in face-to-face shopping after lifting of the COVID-19 restrictions, Barclaycard data released for the whole of 2022 showed retail spending fell 0.8% on the previous year. Barclaycard said the number of transactions this year was up last year by 5%, but the highest inflation in 4 decades had resulted in smaller basket sizes as consumers sought to keep track of their budgets. So, Tom, what impact are you seeing on retailers, which has been caused by this cost of living crisis?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think the first one is sales. Let's start where it's hurting the retailers the most. With inflation peaking this year, as to all sort of predictions, it's still been in there. And what retailers have been doing is taking cost pressures and cost price increases and passing them on to the consumer. And at times like this, I think understanding where you can do that and where you can't do that has been absolutely critical. And that's happened over the last year. It's going to be a really interesting 2023 because I just talked about with inflation peaking, it's set to continue, but it's expected to hopefully fall. I think what really matters at this point is that retailers will be fighting for consumer budgets and consumer spend. And it very much, I think, is going to be a year of consumer champions. How popular has Martin Lewis been over the last year, all of a sudden again, because consumer champions matter when you can't afford things that are absolutely vital for basic life, such as food and energy. What happens at that point is, I think, it gives retailers the opportunity to rise up as that consumer champion. And certainly where the value-based retailers, there's going to be a big play there, and they've got to be really careful in making sure that they reflect cost price increases to protect margins. So I think we'll still see a lot of price increases going through, but absolutely where basic goods, things that matter to consumers, things they need on a day-to-day basis to live, I think there's going to get into more of price wars again. And there's going to be a real balance of things, the way in which retailers price things we need, basics, and the way in which retailers price things that we want, so discretionary purchases. And I think that's going to be really, really interesting as we sort of go through the next year.
Yeah. And what would you, how would you define a consumer champion?
Well, I think there's multiple in many ways. So Martin Lewis is the obvious one because he talks solely independently of any retail or energy company that he's looking into. But for a retailer, I think very much around a retailer that takes a grasp of a key need for the consumer and looks to help them. So I know within food retail this happens a lot, but the likes of sort of Tesco, Morrison's, Asda, putting in low price meals during the school holidays, things like that, when people have real squeezed budgets, but they need to make sure that they feed their kids. What can those types of retailers do to help? And maybe just take the fact that they're not going to make money on that space, but they're helping their community and playing a role in their community. And I guess that's one example of where retail can be a consumer champion, as well as obviously making the cash that they're looking to deliver from margins.
Yeah, so something around purpose over profit at times, which hopefully we're starting to see a little bit more. We're seeing a little bit more of, like you're talking about that in respect to the cost of living crisis. You could apply the same thought process to sustainability as well, sustainable packaging, that type of thing, something that retailers could presumably have brought into play much earlier, but at the expense of profits. But thankfully now more and more are cottoning on to the fact that we need to save the planet, and it's something their consumers are really demanding. So they're making much greater efforts and strides into that kind of sustainability agenda. I think also on the thinking about the cost of living crisis and what retailers can do to help their customers, we're seeing some retailers adapt their product propositions so that they can provide a more affordable line of products. So Asda is a great example. Asda Essentials has really caught the imagination of their customers, offering lower priced products. So, perhaps that's something that more retailers could look to adopt. And, how would they typically, how would a retailer typically go about identifying whether there's an opportunity to introduce that kind of proposition to their customers?
Well, as we sort of introduced at the start of this, I think it'd be remiss of us not to mention data and the role that it can play in this. And I think we'll stick with food retail for a second, because they have so much data in how consumers respond to price, because they've got so many products that are persistent over time, and they change the price of those products. So you can very quickly see, where does price matter to a customer, i.e. when you put the price up, they stop buying it, and where doesn't it matter? So where you put the price up, they continue to buy it. But let's get clear on this, that there are two facets to that second part. If you put the price of milk up, consumers will still buy it because they need it. And that comes back to that need, right? So then it's relying on the retailer to make sure that they're not punishing customers for the things that they need. And they're thinking about their own margin and price balance to make sure that they are protecting the customer's budget where it matters.
Yeah.
The other thing to say in that is, generally within food retail, all of the retailers hold each other to account in that space. The really key lines that consumers buy week in, week out tend to be the ones that everyone battles on over price. So there's a little bit of self-fulfilling there. But that is relevant to other retail areas, all other retail areas. And I think data's massively underutilized for other retail types. And I'll talk about fashion as an example. So let's come back to sort of 3 areas that you can identify through data for price investment or price inflation. And they are basic and needs. Let's talk about milk for a second. So what does that look like in fashion? It's your basic t-shirts, it's your basic jeans, yeah. It's things that people need to operate on a daily basis. It's your school uniforms. And that, you want to be a consumer champion, that has definitely been one of the battlegrounds of recent years, because as we've sort of talked about already with school meals, parents are under a lot of pressure. School uniforms are very expensive. So the more retailers can help out in that space and become a consumer champion, that matters, because people have to buy school uniforms. So because you have to buy it, you could price that higher, but you shouldn't. And that's where a retailer can go, I'm making a decision to be a consumer champion and to help people that have to buy school uniforms. Then you get into sort of the opposite end of the scale, discretionary treats. So when you get into a sort of inflation and a recession-based economy, what people tend to do is they buy the basic things at the lowest cost. And that's why the sort of reinvention of Asda Smart Price has been so successful, because it's always been a great product. I've got a previous history with Asda, by the way, if anyone's questioning that. It's always been a great product, but it looked terrible. The packaging was terrible. You looked at it and you went, that's horrible and cheap. Often, yeah, the quality of that product was akin to mid-tier, so the same sort of mid-tier product range that you have in supermarkets. In many cases, they've just rebranded it. Yeah, so they've rebranded it, so people have gone, this is amazing. No, it was always amazing. It just looks better. That's the first bit. The second bit is they've also sort of engineered and looked to take what was previously mid-tier items and just bring them down slightly. This can be more cost-effective for the consumer. So that's what, again, food supermarkets have done. But at the opposite end, what people then do is to treat themselves, and they tend to treat themselves around occasions. So within food, that might be a meal in on a Saturday night, and actually more premium products, because instead of going out for a meal, I'm going to treat myself to a really nice bottle of wine, some wonderful lamb shanks with some dauphinoise potato, probably some creamed spinach and a little bit of tender stem broccoli to go with it. That is my go-to M&S meal for 2 on a Saturday night, by the way.
Nice.
But that's what you do. You also treat yourself. That's the same in fashion. So bringing it back to fashion. And what you've got to understand is fashion retailers that operate in that space, I think, will continue to do well, because people will want to treat themselves when it matters. I'm going to a party. I want to feel good. On Saturday night, I'm going to buy a new dress, and I'm willing to spend a bit of money on that. What you get, though, is that bit in the middle, and it's going to get squeezed, and it'll be really, really interesting. And that's where data really matters. So when you've got this mass of margin driving volume lines in the middle, you've got to make sure you price those correctly. And that's where data and understanding which are more price sensitive. And so when you change the price, the volume will change, and less price sensitive. So you can start to make the right price decisions on the area of your range that's going to have a big impact on your overall profit, delivery and margin.
Okay, yeah, no, I think it's really good points. And I think another interesting angle to this is consumers trading down. So there was a piece in the Retail Gazette that was looking at different trends for 2023, and Richard Walker, who's the managing director at Iceland, he told Retail Gazette that as people continue to cut down on household costs, Iceland is seeing an increase in customers through its doors who may have once gone to more expensive retailers to shop. And those new customers, some of whom may never have been to Iceland before, provide a huge growth opportunity for us. And we know we have something competitive to offer them in return. And we also saw a major shift in the grocery retail landscape in 2022 when Aldi entered the big four, the big five grocers, I think, taking the place of Morrison's in that list. So continued growth with their value proposition, and presumably customers kind of trading down slightly from the likes of Morrison's, and Tesco are also cited as one of the big losers in that area. So it'll be interesting to see how 2023 progresses. But then also, I think we're talking about the kind of consumer mass in the UK in particular, if you like. But is there still an opportunity for more premium retailers to win customers? Because whereas lots of people are struggling with the cost of living crisis, I think it's pretty plain to see that in some areas a lot of customer behaviour has not really changed. Some of the wealthy have become even more wealthy. So presumably for more luxury retailers and high-end retailers, there's still an opportunity. So, if you're a retailer or a brand and your key audience of customers is a more affluent group of customers, what could you be doing to make sure that you kind of protect that group and you continue to grow your business? Any thoughts on that, Tom?
Yeah, I think if you're premium, be premium. That's the main thing that I'd say. Make sure you are differentiated in the market and you've got a reason to be. So let's think about the fashion retailers that we've sort of seen over recent time, Reiss being a key one. So Reiss were a premium brand which had good fashion, differentiated fashion at a premium price. And then over time, what happened was H&M came and went, well, we've taken your fashion and we've made it at half the price and probably quarter of the price. And Reiss went, yeah, ours is better. And H&M went, yeah, well, ours looks the same. And then what Reiss did is, as their sales started to decline, their proposition declined. And they started to come closer to H&M in terms of the proposition, and they weren't differentiated. And ultimately, that was a challenge for them as a business. And I think that you've got to have a reason to be. You see it with Mint Velvet at the minute. They seem to have kind of stolen a march in that space of premium. The packaging is really, really important. Experience is really, really important for a premium luxury brand retailer. And you've got to make sure that all of those things come together to make it a differentiated experience. The worst thing that you can happen is to get stuck in that slightly sort of luxury but not really premium brand where people go, is it really worth spending 20-30% more when actually I still come out with a plastic bag? I get no help. I get no help when I'm in the store. And ultimately that doesn't feel right. The best example, I love this as an example, by the way, of a brand absolutely ruining their premium sort of credentials is Thornton's. So you look at Hotel Chocolat today, and that's a perfectly, beautifully balanced premium brand. It's the quality of the product, the packaging, everything that they do. Thornton's used to be that. Do we remember? Like, people used to go out and like treat their partners to, is it Viennese? What was the other one? Alpini. Oh, the Alpini logs, amazing. And all of a sudden, what they did is they went into their sales started to decline. And so what they did is they started to diversify and go into retailers which didn't match their brand. And instantly it devalued the brand. And what happened as a result of that, and obviously you can still get a lot of Thornton's, you can go to Wilkinson's to buy Thornton's toffee. I remember Thornton's toffee was like the biggest treat you could buy on a Saturday. Brazil nut toffee, the best.
Before my time.
Not really. But Wilkinson, Wilkinson I still think is the best high street store in the world. What can't you buy from Wilkinson's? But it's not the right place for Thornton's as a premium brand. So my biggest advice or thoughts around how to succeed in this market as a luxury retailer is be luxury. And if you can't afford to be luxury, give up.
Strong words to finish the topic. Although we will at some point revisit your assertion that H&M and Reiss are the same. I completely disagree. Well, there we go. And Wilko's being the best store on a high street. Again, I'm not sure about that. But yeah, we can have a retailer debate some other time.
I'd like to hear your competition.
Personal preferences. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Where else can you buy a toilet seat and pick and mix in the same store, Pete?
I mean, it's not a need state I often find myself having. To be honest with you, it's not something I typically look for, but niche, I would say, very niche. Okay, cool. So we'll move on to the second topic for today. And we're going to talk about the collapse and consolidation of retailers. It's been a very, very turbulent time for retailers in 2022. So according to Daily Mail, that high quality news outlet, more than 17,000 shops shut in 2022 in the worst year for retail in 5 years. Of course, some businesses have seen this as an opportunity to buy and consolidate retailers and brands into their portfolio. Next and the Frasers Group being very prominent examples. So, Tom, what's your view on the collapse and consolidation of retailers, and in particular, where do you think retailers have found themselves getting into difficulty, which has caused their businesses to go under?
I think there are multiple reasons. The obvious one, let's start with it, is the declining footfall on the high street. COVID came and went, but ultimately people's habits around work have changed, and I think fundamentally for good. There's the rise of the twats. So people that are in Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays. So no one wants to be in on a Monday or a Friday anymore. And even on those days, footfall's massively declined. So city centres are fundamentally changing. That was happening before COVID, but the acceleration is huge. So retailers that were on the edge before COVID, and there are many of them, had no chance. What you then are left with is ultimately what we've just described, but using food and a little bit of fashion. What you get is the likes of Primark, which still don't have a strong online offer. You're a reason to go in. And why do you go to Primark? And that is, I want fashion, but I want it at very affordable prices. And if I'm in that need, then I will go to the high street and I will go to Primark and I'll buy what I need. If I want a basic white t-shirt and I want it at the lowest price possible, I will go to Primark and I'll buy that. And then what you've got is premium retailers, which again seem to be still doing okay. The treat economy during this time, wanting to spoil myself, saving all of my money, but then willing to treat myself on a few things, a few luxury goods, which make me feel good, are doing okay. What's happened and where it has consolidated is in that middle. And as we talked about, so you think about the types of brands that have been going and where they're being sucked into. I use Next as an example. So Next is right bang in the middle, as with M&S. And I think John Lewis is, as much as he desperately doesn't want to be there, getting sucked in that direction. But what Next have done, probably before the decline in the high street, is they already had the catalogue offer. We'll probably talk a little bit about catalogue retailers and the data that creates throughout this podcast. But they were historically a store and catalogue based retailer, so they have naturally shifted to a multi-channel world easier than some of the brands that have gone and have struggled with it, because they've already got a supply chain. And you think about Argos as well, another retailer that's naturally done its supply chain. They have had a supply chain set up ready for online propositions. They've done okay. And Next have started, obviously, consolidating some brands and some really interesting brands. So Reiss, as we've mentioned before, we've got a major shareholding in Reiss and probably will have it at some point. Victoria's Secret in there, Superdry, and others. But what becomes really interesting in that space now, what will enable them to succeed, is leveraging that customer data. And leveraging that customer data around some key principles that I bang on about and will never change probably for the future of mankind, which is ease, speed and value for money delivered by retailers. Yeah, so what do I mean by ease? Let's talk about Next. And I think this links us into data. Product personalization seems to have gone by the wayside. Stacking product onto websites, like as much as you can get on there, increases your sales short term. Yeah, what it also does is it gives a horrific customer experience and people can't find what they're looking for. Conversion ultimately will take a hit and ease is going to get affected. What's the answer to that? Product personalization. And what do we mean by product personalization? In that middle ground and what will make people succeed. So the importance of search, sort order. As a customer, who am I and what am I interested in? If I'm on the next site, am I interested in Superdry or am I interested in Reese? Because I tell you right now, they are different types of consumer. And ultimately, if I'm having to scroll through 50 Superdry items to get to the Reese coat that I want, I'm going to get bored, and I'm not going to have bought it. Similarly, and again, I can't comment on Next strategy, but I do look at the website every now and again. They seem to still have a focus on their own brand range being top of the sort order. That's not right. Okay, yes, that's probably where their margins are biggest, but it's not right as a customer that it takes me a longer time to find what I'm after. That's what we're talking about with ease, speed. So this is all around taxonomy, search, tagging, and we'll talk about product attribute and tagging and how we can do that from a data-driven way. But we have to tag items correctly. They have to be easy to find in search. And if you've not done that, I won't find the coat that I want, I won't buy it, and you've lost my sale. So very much a case of making sure that we're tagging products with the right attributes, which means they're easily found on the website when I'm searching. And then the final one, and we've talked about this in the previous conversation, make sure it's value for money. So make sure you're benchmarking those products against the competitor that matters to you as a retailer. Making sure that if you are more expensive, there's a reason you're more expensive. And if you want to be value, make sure you are competitive and offering genuine value on that. So in the middle, in that sort of squeezed middle where it really matters, that online proposition where brands are getting consolidated left, right and centre, products are getting thrown on a website by more and more, and supplier integration is just becoming the norm. You've got to make sure that you personalise that range, you merchandise it on the website like you would in a store. So I walk in and I go, that inspires me, that's what I want. And you do that through data. And I've noticed over the last year, maybe 2 years, that retailers that were doing it well, I think have started to put product over experience way too much. And it's taken me way too long getting through reams of stuff that I'm not interested in to get to the stuff that I am. That, for me, both in store, what range should I have and how should I price it, and online, when do I show it to you, is going to be critical for those sort of retailers that sit in the middle to succeed at this time.
Yeah, and I guess retailers have got to make a tough decision at some point, particularly if they're acquiring other brands. They're going to reach. I mean, it may be that there's a temptation to put all the products on the website and say, okay, customers, you go and find these things. But at some point, you've got to tailor that range is going to be narrowed down. You know, you might have 10, dark blue jumpers from one retailer. You might have another 10 from another retailer that you choose to acquire, but you might not need 20 dark blue jumpers. You might need 5 dark blue jumpers. So at some point, they've got to make that decision. They've kind of got to cut the cord, trim the range so it's much more manageable and easier to navigate for a customer. So some challenging decisions needed there. But then to your point, Tom, it has got to be merchandised really effectively, particularly in an e-commerce environment where more and more customers are buying products, or at least researching products before they go into a store to buy them. I think as well as
interesting that.
Sorry,
interesting you said cut the cord, Pete, because I'm wearing my M&S cords today, and what's really interesting is that M&S have just acquired Thread. So I did quite a bit of shopping through Thread. They were one of the sort of pioneers in leveraging data and product attributes to make recommendations in the fashion market, and obviously had multiple retailers and brands on their website. What I really liked about what Thread did is they knew my size, they knew my fit, and they knew my brand preferences. And then they also looked to append style attributes to that, so they could make recommendations. And what I liked about their website was I could look at multiple brands and retailers, but know that it was tailored, and the first 100 products that I would see would be a better fit for me than the second 100. And with M&S acquiring them, it'll be really interesting to see how much of that capability they actually take on and land on their website, because there should be a great opportunity to do exactly what I've just said, having acquired that business.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, I tried Thread out a few times, and I really like the basic premise of it. Where I think they struggled was their variety of brands. I thought that they obviously were unable to strike partnerships with sufficient variety of brands to make it really, really interesting and sticky certainly from my perspective. But I think, yeah, the M&S acquisition is really interesting, and that might help them to create a more engaging shopping experience for their customers. So very kind of forward thinking. Also, nod to M&S, their clothing range men's clothing range has vastly improved for the 40-something wannabe hipster demographic.
Hence my brilliant chords, Pete.
Exactly. So I think it's on the up. I like M&S. I've got a lot of time for them. M&S apparently did very well over Christmas with their food trading as well. Lots of people splashed out on M&S goodies for their Christmas dinner and other meals over the festive period. So yeah, hopefully M&S go from strength to strength.
Occasions for a treat as well there, Pete. What more so than Christmas? And
exactly.
The other thing, just to link it back to data that I mentioned there, that I'll continue with, which is product attributes. So the reason Thread worked was that it attributed all of the products, which meant that you could quickly filter, you could quickly sort, and you could quickly recommend products suited to me. That is one thing that I think is fundamentally critical to get right for all retailers, and certainly a lot of the ones that I've experienced struggle with it. So often it's relying on the buyer/trader to fill out their product attributes at the point of registering a product on the product file. And often they're not incentivized to get it right. Yet that is fundamentally critical to selling those products. And often, let's keep sticking fashion. If you're a fashion buyer, you're not a data entry person. You're what's on the catwalk, what's in 3 seasons ahead, what inspires me, what materials. Yeah, that's not akin to let me fill out a spreadsheet to make sure that this product sells on a website. So that has to be separated out into the right skill set with the right people, and you've got to get it right at the start. Your product file of data entry needs to be right to power that. The other thing, and something that we do with our solutions, is then consumer-centric product attribution. So what retailers don't do as much of, but should be doing a lot more, and this is where we can help, is looking at what search terms are customers using to find products. So not what I'm calling a product, what are they calling a product? So are they calling a product a warm coat as opposed to down coat? Are they calling a product winter coat again? And have you got that? Have you tagged your product with winter? Because and some people do and do it really, really well. Some people don't. So leveraging search terms, reviews, and other things like that. What we can do is use data techniques and data mining techniques to apply attributes to products as to how consumers are describing them, and reimagining your range from a customer-centric point of view. That fundamental, get your product file right at data entry, and there's going to be some key attributes that you've got to get right: size, color, fit. Yeah, you need to make sure that your merchandiser is getting those filled out correctly. But then on top of that, when you're putting that on a Google Shopping ad, PLA, or just on your website, you've got to make sure that you augment those product tags with the way in which customers are describing your products, so that when they're searching for it in Google, you're coming up with relevant products for the relevant search terms.
Yeah, brilliant points. And I guess for a lot of traditional retailers, there's a challenge there, because there's the way you've described it there, it sounds like a no-brainer, but that's a fundamental shift for a lot of retailers. You're asking a group of people, the traders, to do something that's not natural to them at all. So that's when there's a transformation piece required to get the right skill sets to work alongside a trader, or the right technology products there, so that it makes it easy for them. It's not seen as a burden, but it ultimately helps the organization down the line. So there's strong reasons to do that. I think what will be also be an interesting subject to deep dive into a little in a future episode would be a Thread and Stitch Fix, who are the US equivalent, I think the trailblazers in that market, and what happened to Thread and why they ended up being sold to M&S. I think that could be a nice little standalone episode. So maybe that's something that we'll come back to at a time in the future. But I think there's also, talking about acquiring retailers, I think there's also some big benefits to those companies, the likes of Next, who are acquiring lots of retailers and lots of brands. I think if they can find other retailers who have similar a similar profile of customers to theirs. It helps them expand that range, give their customers more choice, funnily enough, after I've talked about kind of trimming the product range. But there can be some opportunity there to augment their existing product range by buying another retailer or a brand. And on the data front, when the acquiring company is doing their due diligence, they really should be looking to do some analysis of the retailer or the retailer's customers of the company they're looking to acquire, to see how similar that is to their own customer base. There's obviously some supply chain benefits and economies of scale to combining the kind of the buying power and the logistics services of multiple retailers. You could maybe point to a credit offering. So a retailer may buy another retailer to be able to access its credit offering. That's really, really important in times of economic downturn. Lots of customers need credit to be able to buy the products that they want, but also the products that they need, the products that they just need to be able to kind of live their life. And sometimes there's benefits to the brand, having the brand in the portfolio for the retailer, and also to the property. Talking about loads and loads of shops being shut, some retailers are going the other way. Some retailers recognize the value of having a physical footprint. We saw that with Amazon buying Whole Foods a few years ago. So sometimes a retailer will look to buy another retailer who's got lots and lots of stores, and then it enhances their own kind of store-based proposition. Maybe saw that with McColl's. There's a protracted situation with McColl's, where I think we had a couple of the big grocery retailers looking to acquire them, and eventually I think Morrison's bought McColl's. Although, funnily, the McColl's in my local village has remained a McColl's, and you can actually get a free newspaper, a free Financial Times, 6 days a week if you spend £3 or more. And sometimes they give it away for free. Interesting business model, giving your newspaper away for free. I don't know, but to the consumer's benefit.
I think, I was just going to pick up on a couple of points there, Pete, because I didn't really touch on this, but it's interesting because it goes both ways. And I told you catalogue retail will come back into this conversation. Two interesting movements in the market. So we think about consolidation of retailers we've been talking about. So Boohoo. Boohoo have been interestingly acquiring brands rather than retailers, if you like, with their high street closures. So Oasis, Caramel and Coast Warehouse. And if you think about those brands and the customers of Boohoo previously, there's probably a Venn diagram. Everything in life's a Venn diagram. So there's an overlap, but not a big one within that. But what they've also done is they've acquired a sort of a high street presence through the purchase app, but they have customer data. And interestingly, they are customer data driven. And then you've got the flip of that. So you've got the likes of Fraser's Group and obviously Sports Direct have gone more into the space of buying online brands and people with customer data and credit expertise. And I'll go back to my first ever job at Littlewoods, now Very.com. The proposition at Very was quite simple. Yeah, it was product, i.e. home, fashion, and credit. But it was driven out of customer data. And the principles of what they did have suddenly come back to the fore now. So what Klarna did, however long it was that it sort of took the high street by storm, is they just went, well, what did they do 20, 30, 40 years ago? But just apply it to every brand, not the brand that you're operating within. And if you look at Very's response to that, they've got a direct competing product to Klarna. If you look at other high street retailers, I think credit is going to grow. But the access to customer data is also something that high street retailers coming the other way can benefit from. So I think there's going to be a very interesting ground where high street retailers that haven't felt the need to have an accurate product file because everything's merchandised in store, haven't felt the need to leverage customer data to promote credit propositions to the right people, that are going to obviously make sure that you don't get bad debt from that, but you do get sales and you're offering it to the right people in a responsible way. And leveraging customer data to then make range decisions. So where have I got too much range? Where have I got a lot of substitutability? I can see from my customer data that there are 10 products here that are all competing for the same customer need and the same customer mission. Do I really need 10 of them? Could I have 5 in the world of multi-brand, multi-retail propositions? And going that way. And I think it's really, really interesting that almost your next catalogues of this world have kind of come to that point. High streets moving up the other way, but ultimately it comes down to what the catalogue companies of 50 years ago were doing and have always done. But bringing that knowledge and expertise into the current world.
Great points. Okay, so we're going to move on to our final topic of today's discussion, and we're going to talk about retail media. So we've talked about so far a lot of difficulties for retailers and the squeeze with the cost of living crisis on consumers, what that means for retailers, cost of goods going up, so pretty dark times for many retailers. However, retail media offers a new path to retail profit. And, I don't know if it's the LinkedIn algorithm has just totally sussed me out, but, every time I scroll through LinkedIn, there are just reams and reams of stories about retail media and the opportunity that it offers for retailers. So first of all, let's just look at the retail media market size. So Boston Consulting Group and various other people have reported on retail market size. Size seems to be different depending on whose report you read. But the BCG one, I think, let's go with that. They're a trusted source. So they say that the retail media market is growing 25% year on year, up to an estimated value of $100 million by 2027. I have seen some other estimates putting it maybe 100 million higher than that, but either way, it's a huge market and it's growing really, really quickly, particularly in comparison to other forms of marketing and advertising. What exactly is retail media, I hear you ask? So retail media refers to retailers allowing brands to buy advertising space across their owned properties. So that might be the retailer's website or in a physical store, and third-party properties, which are typically other websites, using data to connect with consumers throughout that buyer journey. And one of the most prominent examples of retail media would be Amazon, something that most of us will be familiar with. And there's been a noticeable increase in sponsored product listings when you search for products on the Amazon website, and that's retail media in action. So brands are paying to get their products in front of highly relevant audiences. And this is a key point when consumers are at a critical point in their purchase journey. And according to Digiday.com, Amazon's ad business earned $9.5 billion in Q3 alone, which is massive. So Tom, why do you think retail media is gaining such rapid traction?
I think it's twofold, really. So everyone should be fully aware of the much publicised view on third-party cookies and data privacy. The first thing to say is third-party cookies will be going, and there are many reasons for that happening, and it varies across the globe. So in terms of how that sort of data can be used, but ultimately, what's clear is the major technology players have all accepted and are even pushing for the fact that third-party cookie data is not really going to be used in advertising revenue. Google's privacy policy, especially on that, has drawn interest from many areas. So the fact that Google are keen and are pushing this themselves always makes me a little bit suspicious as to what else they've got that is going to replace that and replace their revenues, because I'm pretty confident they've got a plan, and they wouldn't just be doing this out of the good of their own heart. But we'll see and watch that space. The key thing that we're clear about is it's happening, and what it means is retailers have got to get control of their first-party data, and there's a massive opportunity to leverage first-party data. We'll come back to catalogue companies again in a second, but who have been doing it for 50 years. Leverage first-party data to make sure that they own the relationship with their customers. But interestingly, as you also described, Pete, this gives the opportunity for retail media play, where they can also leverage that data to increase income and revenue from looking at selling other people's media and brands and products. The opportunity to do that is increasing and it's coming to the fore. So it's easy for the likes of Amazon, the likes of Walmart, who are a multi-brand retailer to monetize the data that they have for their customers, because brands, there are so many brands within them competing for that share of the sort of purse, that Coke and Pepsi are willing to spend a lot of money in media to advertise on Walmart's website. That's how it started. Yeah, that multi-brand retailer, Amazon, the obvious one as well, Pete, you mentioned. However, there's now an opportunity to think beyond that. And let's talk about high street retailers again. So digital out of home, digital screens within stores. A lot of retailers are starting to put these in. They're part of merchandising. They're part of a way of retail experience. But what it also means is that you have a way of communicating with the customer when they're in your store. Second thing is apps and the rise of apps. So every retailer seems to want an app. I think an app's a bit pointless unless there's a transactional element to it or a loyalty element to it. But if you've got either of those two things, there's an opportunity. And there's an opportunity in many ways to then start to monetize that data, to offer that asset up to different retailers offering complementary types of products that you can make money from. And as the retail market gets squeezed, why wouldn't you want to make money from selling media? And you do that from getting hold of your own first-party data. So I'll kind of give you an example that I've thought about recently as to where this translates. So, like I say, if you go into Walmart, you'll see lots of ads for Pepsi and Coke, and they're paying them. They're paying Walmart for that space. You go on the website and you'll see banner ads pushing those offers, promos, deals. But what's stopping us when I walk into McDonald's? And I walk into McDonald's, which is on the high street. And on the high street, McDonald's have lots of screens and have an app now. And at the end of that app transaction, if some of those assets were given up to say, come into Primark today, and we've got 20% off women's wear if you quote this code. What you're actually doing is encouraging footfall into a high street store that is affined with McDonald's. I think M&S is a really interesting one for this, and I think M&S can think about where the types of affined retailers that they could start to drive footfall from, and it gets really, really interesting. So the reason it's taken off is because people are making money from it. Okay, and people have understood that first party data has a value. And here's the important thing: the concept of the value exchange seems to be getting talked about again. And the value exchange, if I will give you my data in return for something I get back. I mean, Tesco Club Card, let's talk about that for a second. You cannot shop in Tesco anymore without a Tesco Club Card. You can't do it. It's 10% more expensive. So it's a bit of a naughty value exchange for Tesco, but the basics are gone. The value exchange is cheaper.
Very overt as well now.
There's a reason.
It literally says it on the label, on the price label.
Yeah, they've not even tried to hide it. And to the point now where I was at the checkout the other day and somebody at the front had a shop and they were like, have you got a club card? And they were like, no, it's in the car. And they were like, do you want to go and get it? I mean, me in the queue is not good in the first place. Do you want to go and get it? And I'm like, no, you don't want to go and get it because that is a long way away. I'm like, nah, it's too far. She's like, it's going to cost you £4 less on your shop. And the guy at the front went, oh. And someone went, do you want my club card? Because I'll have your points. And they were like, yeah. Right, so they came, they scanned it. The next person went through and they got a club card. No, can I have your club card? It's got ridiculous. But back to the point, there's a value exchange, and I think that the point that I'm trying to make is retailers have worked out that they can make money from selling assets in their own environment, which don't necessarily push their own goods. Technology, apps, data clean rooms, ways of doing that has enabled them to start monetizing it and to start putting relevant content on physical environments and personalize that, which hasn't been possible until recently. And as a result of that, there's an opportunity for retailers to make money and make margin from selling media. And if that's the possibility and it benefits their consumers, I come into a coffee shop and I get some great vouchers for M&S. Why wouldn't they do that?
Exactly. It'd be interesting to see psychologically how consumers start to react to these kind of sponsored listings, sponsored ads, as opposed to the more organic ads. So, searching for stuff which has really been brought to the mainstream by Google. And I don't know about you, Tom, but when I do a Google search now, it'll come back with some paid results and some organic results. And I will almost always scan down beyond the paid results, because I know you've paid to put your ad there, to the organic results, because I think you've actually earned your place on that screen. And, somehow I have more trust in those search results. Do you think the same will apply to sponsored listings and organic listings within a retail environment?
100% yes. And simply this, and I think Google's done it too much now. You have to go too far down that page to get to the organic listings. And the same applies for retail, which is it's got to be relevant to me, and it's got to offer me value. And if you're putting 10 things in front of me that aren't relevant and aren't offering me value just because someone's paid you to do it, you've lost me. Let's go back to what I said before. It's not easy. That's not ease. That's not speed. You're making me scroll. So you've got to get it right. That doesn't mean to say that one sponsored listing isn't right. That's fine. Do you know what I mean? That's a little bit at the top of the page, and you can take revenue from that. Ideally, though, that one sponsored product is personalised and tailored to me, and that's what retailers need to get right as they get into this space, which is make sure that it is complementary offers to what people are looking for, that it either is an affined product to the need state that I'm in. So if I'm buying sort of clothing for or party clothing, I'll just come back to this, party dress for a Friday night, what are the other products and categories that might be interesting to me? But similarly, when we start to talk about this multi-retailer piece, what you don't want to end up doing is having a ton of Primark stuff at the top of my app when I'm actually just ordering a coffee in Starbucks. It's like, this doesn't work for me. Why are you doing this? I'm just trying to get a coffee and sit down and eat my lunch and do some work. So yeah, it's got to be complementary, and data is the way in which you ensure that that's the case. But there are some good partnerships out there and some good opportunities for retailers to start thinking.
Yeah, definitely. And interesting to see which retailers are brave with this too, because it might be either on a website or in a physical store. If you're using some of that media space to promote a third-party retailer or brand, and then it's encouraging the customer to either click away or to literally walk down the street to get to that other retailer or brand, but it's for the good of the consumer. That is a brave decision to make. So you lose that kind of dwell time and that attention from the consumer. But I guess if it's done in the right way, and maybe the retailer says that you can get 10% off at retailer X if you spend £30 in our store, maybe that's a way to do it. So both retailers kind of benefit from that. But it'll be interesting to see how that progresses. And to your point, Tom, it's got to be for the benefit of the consumer journey. So you can't be kind of jolted with an offer for something that's not relevant at an inappropriate time in your journey with the retailer. Okay, cool. And in a physical environment as well. I think how media it begins to be used in a physical environment will be really interesting to see. So, a lot of formats have been a bit kind of boring so far, but there's an opportunity for more creative and immersive formats. I mean, you've seen something, particularly on larger billboards. I don't know if you ever see the Piccadilly Circus billboard. There's some incredible kind of immersive ad formats being used that look like, you've got monsters coming out from the billboard and all kinds of things. But if you could have that kind of idea, possibly not with monsters, but in a retail setting, that might be something that really makes the most of that kind of physical retail experience and brings a brand to life, gets the consumer's attention, and encourages them to check that brand or that retailer out. So an interesting space to see develop.
So we talked about retail media and the opportunity to leverage first-party data. I think it'd be remiss of us not to talk about the sort of groundswell in change as to around digital media and how that's currently being bought briefly. So the likes of PLAs and paid search with Google, so product listing ads, the likes of Meta and how people are targeting, the likes of Insta and product-led ads there, is all going to change And as that changes, I'm finding it really interesting to see how media buying is being slow to catch up with that, and how first-party data can support with it. So at the minute, the way in which it tends to work is very much around broad audiences. So passing customers over as to be quite broad. Here are my shoppers. Meta, can you go and find more of them? And they'll do that, but they'll do it based on intent. Okay, so intent being, I know from all of the data sources that we have together that this consumer's in the market for trainers. And I can talk about that because I'm constantly in the market for trainers, and the amount of trainer ads I get across all of my social media is obscene, and advertising works because I keep buying them. So that's good. Intent is good, okay? But the ability to deliver intent is going to decline as third party declines. It will still be there. Google won't have the two in it, but it will still be there. And that's one thing I don't like about the way in which media is bought at the minute through those types of companies. No, you give us an audience and we'll find the people that are going to convert. Second thing is what they maximise generally on is ad revenue. So it is very much around clicks. And then what we're looking is that closed feedback loop to try and get through to conversion. But it has to get better than that. And this is where first party data has an opportunity. So where is that market going and what's happening and the sort of movement in that space? It really is down to leveraging first party data to optimize your media campaigns now. Yeah, do it now. Because if you do it in 6-8 months' time, when third party is removed, you are going to be playing catch up and you are going to be in a lot of trouble. So what do we mean by that? And what does it look like? I think simply this. So audiences are going to stop being broad and generic. Yeah, they currently are, because we'll let intent do the job. We'll move away from a click-based model. And the final bit is intent will decline, but intent and interest will still remain, i.e. I'm interested in buying some trainers. That's what the social media companies and the likes of Google will do. But what do we need to do with first-party data? It has to be audience-driven. So first thing is, it's no longer broad audiences, it's tailored audiences, it's first-party data, it's lookalikes. So the ability to take a specific audience, not just, so we'll talk about Very again. So what do Very want? They might be running a women's fashion campaign, a high-end fashion campaign. Don't just give me, here's women who have bought fashion. What you want to do is to go, here are an audience that are refined with a very specific need state of fashion and high-end. That's what you can do with first-party data. The second bit, and here are profitable ones. So don't just give me anybody that's interested in buying these types of products. I'm going to get a lot of non-credit, pay on a card, so pay off on a balance. I don't make enough margin because this is a promoted product offering, so there's no margin in what I'm putting out there. I want credit, fashion conscious females for this campaign, okay, and have intent on my first party data to do that. Now go and look alike to that group of people, not just a very broad anyone that's interested in women's fashion. So bespoke campaigns, fast audience generation, yeah, moving away from broad audiences to specific audiences that have a specific aim, and multi-campaigns, profit-based recruitment. That's the next thing. So moving away from a click-based model to a profit-based model, the closed feedback loop, making sure, and the likes of Google already want you to do this, give you back in their feeds your data. Is this a profitable customer? What are the sales for this customer? The problem is that's their data then, because you've given it back to them. They're not telling you how they're optimizing based on that. They're just going, we will. And broadly, you've got to trust that they will, but it's black box. So we've got to, as data controllers, take ownership of our first party data to make sure, no, we'll tell you what campaigns that we want. We'll tell you whether these customers are the right ones for us. And we want you to look alike to more of the good customers. And have that proper relationship. And then the final one is it will be augmented by intent. So once we have the right person that we're targeting, then apply your intent. And so I think that's that broad campaign approach led by intent to a more campaign approach driven by interest and customer value is the way in which the market's going. To do that, retailers quickly need to get a hold of their first party data. And just before I get off my soapbox, because I can absolutely hear that I'm on one, this is going to get interesting around the world, right? Because already the UK are looking at different policies around cookies than the EU after Brexit. In the UK, it's different already. So the way in which you'll need to operate, and we'll use the US market in a second, and everything's going to come back to catalogue retailing in this podcast, but in the US, there are data co-ops. Okay, and what those data co-ops is, because in the US GDPR doesn't exist, you can bring together first-party data from multiple retailers and consumer data sources, and you can use that data in a really transparent way to build lookalikes. Here are the people that I'm interested in finding. Can you find me more of them? Yeah. Remember this, Pete? Like we did this 20 years ago. I'll build you a lookalike model, and I'll tell you how big your audience can go. But here's the important bit. Transparently, I'll tell you what the attributes are as to why I'm saying that. And here's the data. Yeah? So not Google, trust us. It's just in there. It's there. You give us your data, we'll do the rest. It's very much this is a data share agreement, and we work together to find those audiences. I think it's going to be really interesting. I think the UK are looking to not be as strict on cookie opt-in sign-up. Let's be honest, that's not working. So what a brilliant bit of GDPR that on every website you have to just click accept on the cookie policy, which everyone does. I mean, that's not working, is it? Or you just navigate off the website because you can't be bothered with it. So they're looking at different ways to do that. I don't think third party in its entirety is dead. So there's definitely going to be ways of linking data. Data clean rooms are going to be the future, where first party data from different retailers and companies are put together, probably to enable that data co-op type model, which isn't black box. It is more transparent. But there's a lot that needs to happen to get there. And I think it'd be really interesting to see where Google go with their privacy work, how much they're willing to think about transparency. I don't think ever, but we'll see. But whether retailers taking ownership of their own first party data and storing that in that similar model to the US data co-ops and making that work starts to compete with that likes of Google, where actually we've got an affiliated data set here that's better than what you're doing, Google, because paid search is a great example. It's just become too expensive for anyone. Paid search was always the way in which you got sales. Now it's just too expensive. People have moved away from it. And I think there's loads of interesting stuff that's going to come out of that. Probably another podcast and one that we'll dive into. But the final bit that I want to say about it is critical that retailers get hold of their first party data today, connect it to those media sources to make sure that they're ready for specific audience-led campaigns, data collaboration, which will facilitate data monetization through media. And they start to look to do that, because if they wait 12 months time and third-party data is canned, you'll be competing in a very expensive world where Google have got all your data and your PLA ad listings are going to go up 20-30%, and that's just going to hit straight on your margins. So loads of interesting stuff in that space. I'll get off my soapbox. You'll probably want to edit all of this out of the podcast because I've gone on a bit too much. But I couldn't have the retail media conversation without going into all of that.
The points that you made there, really, yeah, and that need to be in control of your first party data, it is so vital now. So yeah, great point to finish on. So we've covered three really key topics at the moment. We talked about the cost of living crisis. We've talked about the collapse and consolidation of retailers, and we've talked about retail media, a new path to profit for retailers. So thank you everyone for listening. Please tune in again next time. We're going to touch on the rise of the circular economy. We're going to talk about what's next for department stores, and we're going to ask, is it dark days for Black Friday? So three more interesting topics to talk about next time. Thank you, Tom, for your valuable input. Much appreciated. Yeah, join us again next time. Thanks.